There is a growing movement to have athletes deemed as employees in the world of college sports. This is an emergency episode 47 of College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We've been talking about this for months, well actually for years at Flug Empire on our Twitter account, and since we started this show on August 10th. In fact, our very first episode is basically a manifesto of the changing world of college sports. And it explains why you're seeing all the changes or all the realignment, all the movement, all the consolidation, and all the deregulation of college sports as we know it. Tonight, there is some breaking news from Ross Dellinger of SI. We're going to be covering this. We cover everything on Peek Around the Corner. A lot of fun stuff, a lot of not so fun stuff, and the real serious stories like this one. We wanted to hop on here quick. We want to cover it because this is so very important. Important to the future of college sports and important to acknowledge, to understand what is going around you, what is happening now, and what your universities that you support, what they're going to try to do in the future. Now, the changing world of college sports, it's complicated. It's good and there's bad. But basically, the student athletes, there is a movement. There is a movement afoot, and it's been going on for quite a while, that student athletes will become employees of the universities. This article was just released, published by Ross Dellinger of SI. We're going to get into it right now. Legal complaint around student-athlete compensation takes aggressive next step. Again, this is Ross Dellinger of SI. The new government entity is entering the growing movement to have athletes deemed as employees. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, could soon begin what one legal expert describes as an aggressive investigation into whether unpaid college athletes are being discriminated against because they are not fairly compensated. The EEOC was recently referred to an employment and civil rights complaint filed by the National College Players Association, the NCPA, to the Department of Education in March. The complaint asserts that all 350 NCAA Division I schools are violating black student civil rights by colluding to cap compensation. The NCAA limits what schools can offer athletes in terms of scholarship money and largely prohibits any direct pay to players. Largely prohibits. We do know that there's about $5,800 that a university can direct pay to a player if that student athlete, if that player does well enough in school, for example. There's an education direct payment. So it largely prohibits any direct pay to players from the university. Okay, let's go on. The athletic employment debate has gained momentum over the past several years as revenue growth within college sports industry continues to expand in varying ways, mostly because of men's basketball and football. For instance, in the most recent revenue windfalls, the Big Ten struck a TV deal to earn $1.1 billion annually, and leaders just approved an expansion to the college football playoffs that could fetch $2 billion a year. So, again, a whole bunch of money is coming in. So let's go on. It's only a matter of time before college athletes are considered employees. That's certainly one takeaway from this decision. But we do believe that each department should be doing their part in terms of enforcing existing laws relative to the college athletes' rights and college students, including the Department of Education. So we're going to skip a few of these paragraphs. Basically, the EEOC is investigating a complaint and it's getting pretty far along the process. And it's just another log on the fire that student athletes will be deemed as employees of these universities. And here is from Mitt Winter. He is a great follow on Twitter. I would highly suggest you follow Mitt Winter. We're going to take it from a few paragraphs down here in the article. It's somewhat significant that the complaint is not completely dead and that there is another government agency looking into it, says Mitt Winter, a sports attorney based in Kansas City, who has handled NCAA-related cases in the past. The schools will get a chance to show they are not discriminating against the athletes. The EEOC could just accept the reasoning and decide not to pursue charges further. Okay, we're going to skip a couple paragraphs here. You can read it on SI, Ross Dellinger. It was just released. The EEOC complaint is seeking to eliminate the cap on compensation, potentially opening the door for athletes to receive additional pay from their schools. In the complaint, the NCPA argues that because a high percentage of black students are also college athletes, the NCAA-wide compensation limits a disparate impact on black college students. The letter notes that the EEOC enforces the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employees of 15 or more persons from discriminating against its employees and applicants for employment on the basis of race, color, origin, gender, identity, sex, or religion. Again, we're going to skip a few paragraphs here. Now, we often talk, stepping outside of this article for a second, we often talk about what would be the impact of a student athlete becoming an employee of the university. Well, they're going to be compensated more, but there's also a negative effect to that student athlete. And this paragraph describes it very well. Again, this is Ross Dellinger of SI. Deeming college athletes as employees would have wide-ranging impacts on the athletes in the universities. Athletes would be introduced to federal taxation and may be at risk of termination by the new employer, the school. Schools could lose their Section 501 designation, which impacts taxation on bond financing and charitable gifts. Experts say student fees and public support might disappear as well. So let's do a deep dive into this paragraph. Athletes would be introduced to federal taxation, so therefore this increased compensation, and there's another paragraph in this article at the end that describes what the increased compensation could look like for these student athletes depending on what sport they're in. Athletes would be introduced to federal taxation, so they're going to be taxed for the extra compensation they receive, because right now they do not get taxed on their scholarship compensation. Athletes and they may be risk of termination. So if you're a field goal kicker, you're at Florida State, for example, your scholarship, you're being compensated, you miss 5 of your first 7 field goals, and since you're an employee of Florida State, they can terminate you. Just an example of the negative effects of being a possible employee of a university within the athletic program, within a team. Also, there's an impact, a possible real negative impact on the universities, because experts say student fees and public support might disappear. There are many universities where the athletic department gets compensated to fill in the gap for their budgets as this university directs student fees or part of the student fees into the athletic program, into the athletic department. And public support might dry up if student athletes become employees. Let's go back to the article. It is a complex issue, like a freight train, said one athletic director. It is bearing down on college sports. Grouped with other changes that are quickly altering the industry's landscape, some say for the better, others say for the worse. And here's the paragraph that I want to get to, and we'll end it on. The NCPA's 9-page complaint outlines the millions of dollars basketball and football players are missing out because of what it calls the unjust compensation limits. The complaint gives estimates of the percent of compensation of total revenue that each major sports athletes receive. 29.9% for women's basketball, 8.9% for men's basketball, and 8.1% for football. In other words, women basketball players are each being denied another $24,000 a year in compensation, according to this complaint. Men's basketball players are being denied $164,000 a year in accordance to this complaint because of the cap on compensation, the artificial cap on compensation. And football players are being denied $185,000 each per year in accordance to this complaint because they're being capped on their compensation. And I'll end it with this last paragraph. College athletes throughout predominantly white sports receive fair market compensation, but athletes in the only predominantly black sports, so football, men's and women's basketball, do not. Huma told SI in the spring, all college athletes should have the opportunity to receive fair market pay. This can happen without cutting any sports. Colleges would just have to spend a little less on coaches' salaries, luxury facilities, what have you. So this was a complaint. The EEOC, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has picked up on it, and a lot of people are expecting an aggressive investigation. Therefore, so what do I think? What does all this mean? This is just another log on the fire. Even without all this, even without the EEOC coming into play on this subject, there is movement to have student athletes become employees. And this has been known for a few years now. This has been the perception of many in college sports, the decision makers. This was part of the reason why Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12 and are going to go to the SEC. Because student athletes, either they're going to be more heavily compensated than ever before. Either within being an employee of the school, some sort of third-party contractor of the school, however it gets done, however it gets framed, however legally they do it, student athletes are going to get heavily more compensated for what they do for these universities. And you look around the college sports, you're seeing these media deals increasing exponentially. Now you're seeing the college football expanded playoffs. You're seeing the coaches make more and more and more money. You're still seeing facilities built. But student athletes becoming more compensated, increased compensation is driving a lot of what is going on in regards to realignment. And even with the college football expanded playoffs. Go back, if you haven't been watching us at Peek Around the Corner, go back to our first episode. Go back to our very first episode on August 10th. It's basically the manifesto. It explains why Oklahoma and Texas went to the SEC, and explained why that we broke the news on March 31st that USC called the Big Ten. And we went through all the reasons during March, April, May, June, before anyone knew what was going on, or most people didn't know what was going on. And the national reporters, we were telling people weekly why USC is going to do this, why they called. It's because all the reasons that are laid out in this article and other articles. Compensation is coming. The conferences are becoming more powerful to make their own rules. NCAA becoming weaker, mostly directed by the Supreme Court and their rulings on the Alston case. So this is all happening. This is just another log on the fire. This is why when people say realignment is slowed down because of the college football playoffs. Realignment right now, even in this wave, is only going to be slowed down because the media companies or potential new media companies of the Big Ten and potentially the Big 12 say, no, we're just not going to do it. We don't see the value. We're not going to pay out the money. That's the only way realignment is stopping right now. Because all the other forces are saying more consolidation, more consolidation, more realignment. Oregon, I'm telling you. By the way, before we get to this last part, please hit the like button. If you like this content, please subscribe to this channel as we march towards 1,000 subscribers. We thank you so much. It helps us with the algorithms in YouTube when we get more subscribers. And please share this video. There's no question, there is no doubt that right now, even this evening, every moment during this decision hot window between August 15th and October 15th, Oregon and Washington are doing all they can to get into the Big Ten. Even if they have to accept a payments between 2024 to 2030, that is well below the other Big Ten schools, they will do it. And it's because of this article, of this reality, and other realities that is happening in college sports today. I felt I needed to show, this just broke. The EEOC is getting involved. You might say, well, you know what? That's not important. That's just another story. Possibly, maybe that could happen. I'm telling you that this is important. When you have another government entity, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with it. From what we're telling you, this is important. This is vital to understand, to know. There's a big push in many different directions to try to get student athletes classified as employees of the universities. And if that falls short, the heavy push is there to get student athletes way more compensated in the future than they are now. And that's why these TV media deals, getting as much money as possible, is so important for these universities and conferences. Connect that with the fact that these media companies kind of want consolidations, bigger brands playing bigger brands more often. We've talked about that in the previous couple episodes. And because of deregulation of college sports, where conferences are now taking over the power, the ruling, they're going to make their own rules, and not so much the NCAA. So there you have it. Breaking news, Ross Dellinger, SI, and I would take this very important information to understand what is going on and what's going to happen here, I think, relatively soon once again. Again, from all of us at Peek Around the Corner to all of you, please, until next time, y'all take care of each other. Thank you so very much.